Hello and welcome to Aquatic Globe Travel. In this video we would like to share with you our experience about Rocky Mountaineer train ride from Banff to Vancouver. Before getting on train, we stayed one night at beautiful town of Banff. Next morning, we were picked up at 7 a.m. from our hotel and transferred to Rocky Mountaineer for embarkation.
Release the brakes. We are on our way. Let's all say farewell to Banff and our Banff station staff will be waiting to us very shortly here on the right hand side. Of course, first like to wave back, right?
Golden Leaf has 2 levels. All seatings are on the second floor, and restaurant, washroom and open platform or the first one. We are going through Rocky Mountains alongside Bow River that starts at Lake Louise and flowing easterly, entering Atlantic Ocean.
Inside of the continental divide, so you'll notice that all of the water is flowing easterly. So the first river is the only river in our journey today that we'll see the water flowing easterly that will be emptying eventually out into the Atlantic Ocean here. Also as well, we're in our first of 4 mountain ranges today. And what mountain range is this? The Rockies. Yeah, that's correct. But if you take a look to the right, the highway, the Trans-Canada Highway, is at an even steeper terrain than we're traveling along. Now, in Canada, trains are only allowed to travel at a 2.2% gradient. That's the maximum downhill decline or uphill incline that is safe for trains to travel. And if you take a look at the Trans-Canada, that's a 4.4% grade. That was actually the bed of the old Canadian Pacific Railway. Click, 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 click. There we go. So if a train is more than 200 boxcars long, you can actually see the entrance and exit of those freight trains. And there's a siding along the highway that people will pull over during the summertime. During the winter, it's full of snow, you can't do it. But during the summertime, people will wait for hours to see the long trains going through the spiral tunnels just to take pictures of them. So here we are in our first spiral tunnel, and it doesn't feel like we're playing corners, does it? It feels pretty smooth, but one of the only ways to tell that we are turning is by looking at the rail car in front of us.
We are now traveling along Kicking Horse River that flowing westerly.
this giant bridge that we're currently traveling under is the Park Bridge, and it is part of the Trans-Canada Highway system, and it was built in 2006 to replace one of the most dangerous sections of the Trans-Canada Highway that was responsible for upwards of 200 accidents a year. So by using the Park Bridge there instead of the previous route, it made this section of highway much safer. And in fact, they are actually still in the process of upgrading the highway through this portion of the Kicking Horse Pass. The town of Golden that we're currently just traveling through. It used to be named the Kicking Horse Flats, but they renamed it Golden to try and attract more tourism and settlers as the Canadian Railway, or Canadian Pacific, had built its way through here. After the Canadian Pacific had been built, it did have a history of forestry, but also, as I mentioned, there's the tourism factor. There is fantastic mountaineering in these parts, as you can imagine, and Swiss guides actually came over to this part of the world, the turn of the century, to try to develop that tourism. And there's even a little part of the town of Golden called Edelweiss, which has Swiss-style architecture. Today, Golden is home to the Kicking Horse Ski Resort, and we can actually see it on the left-hand side. It's one of the most vertical terrain ski resorts in British Columbia, so if you are new to skiing, it might not be for you. But my favorite part about the Kicking Horse Ski Resort is the fact that they have a very special resident that lives there. His name is Boo.
A horse?
Can anybody guess what Boo is?
A ghost.
He's a bear, yes. He actually was an orphan grizzly bear from the Caribou, and he was part of the same project that Grinder and Kula that live up at Grouse Mountain were, and that was to try and take these bears and give them as great of a life as possible, but they weren't able to fully release them out into the wild because, of course, they didn't learn the ways of a bear from their mother. But Boo and Grinder and Kula live in huge enclosures. And Boo did used to actually have a sister. Her name was Carrie. So it was Carrie Boo. But Carrie didn't, unfortunately, make it. So Boo's all by himself, and Boo actually got lonely for his first few years in the enclosure and managed to escape in the spring. He had a bit of spring fever. So he would go out, and they were looking for Boo everywhere, all over the Kicking Horse Ski Resort. It's not great to have a somewhat domesticated grizzly bear on the loose. But then Boo, I guess, must have found a girlfriend, and then did his thing, and then came back home, because who wouldn't want to get fed on a regular basis? And his bed was actually in his enclosure too, so that's where he dens over the winter. That's the special thing about Grinder and Kula and Boo, is they're the only bears in captivity that actually hibernate. And so that's given scientists and biologists quite the insight into grizzlies that do hibernate, because they can see their activity. They've got cameras in their dens, and it's been a very interesting experiment. But Boo actually escaped twice, and then finally they fixed him and he stopped escaping. This next town is the town of Revelstoke. Now, Revelstoke marks the end of our first full subdivision. We did a little subdivision coming out of Banff there, so we're a little over halfway to Kamloops at this point in our day here. Now, we see lots of sets of railway tracks. During the week we'll come in, and sometimes we'll be absolutely full. There's not too many trains here, so that bodes pretty well for the rest of our journey into Kamloops. Let's keep thinking positively that we continue moving at the rate that we're moving. So far, so good. Now, with Revelstoke here, it is a winter enthusiast wonderland. Who here likes to ski? Quite a few people?
She started.
Well, Revelstoke is home to one of British Columbia's newest ski resorts, and it's said to have some of the best snow in all of British Columbia. That is the Revelstoke Mountain Resort. Now, it is kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's a difficult ski resort to get to, but winter enthusiasts, including the Kirkland family from Costco, actually have built homes here in Revelstoke because the snow is so good. You think of Whistler being the big attraction for skiing in British Columbia, but Revelstoke is up and coming, so we shall see. We don't actually see that particular mountain from the train here, but we do have a lot of industry in Revelstoke as well. There is a very large hydroelectric dam nearby that provides quite a bit of hydroelectricity for British Columbia, and so that provides lots of employment. The Canadian Pacific Railway provides quite a bit of employment as well. Now, Revelstoke does sit right on the Columbia River once again. So we saw the Columbia River a little earlier today, right outside of Golden, and now we're going to see it again. You see the Columbia River does a huge horseshoe through the province. And this is what actually confused the early explorers when they were trying to chart the Columbia River. I mentioned David Thompson a little bit earlier. He was charting the Columbia River, and as soon as he started doing the horseshoe, he thought he was on the wrong river, so he turned around, backtracked, and that's how Lewis and Clark actually beat him for charting the Columbia River. Yeah, he was quite the cartographer and stenographer, and his story is very impressive. He was orphaned in England, and the Grey Coat Society took him in because he was quite smart, and he learned arithmetic and how to read and write. Then the Hudson's Bay Company brought him over to the New World, and were training him when he met his wife Charlotte at the young age of 14. They got married pretty quickly after that. Charlotte was a First Nations girl, and David Thompson would spend a lot of time with her family because he didn't have a family of his own. And so he learned the First Nations way of charting and mapping and reading the stars. And then he also knew the New World way of mapping and charting and reading the stars. And Charlotte would come with David Thompson on his expeditions, and they would bring their children in. And total they had 16 kids. So that in itself is an impressive feat. But he was responsible for charting 1/3 of the continent of North America, and his maps were so accurate that they were used all the way until the digital age. Yes. Quite the fellow, David Thompson. But Lewis and Clark got all the fortune. Wow. All right, now going back to Revelstoke here, this little town did get its name from Lord Revelstoke. And Lord Revelstoke was part of the
We're
Bering
about 43
Bank.
in Manitoba.
And I see some nods, yes, the Bering Bank. Their family actually provided the funding that good old Cyrus Westfield didn't provide for the Canadian Pacific. So we've got the Revelstoke Railway Museum there. And during the winter time, Revelstoke sees over 60 feet some seasons cumulatively over the winter of snow. So clearing the tracks is big business here as well. A few of you notice those big spade-like pushers, and those will go in front of a locomotive, and that will clear the tracks in the winter time here. So in just a few moments, we will be heading right over the Columbia River, and there is going to be a bridge on the right-hand side, and that bridge is very similar to a bridge that you will be seeing when you're in Vancouver, which is the Lions Gate Bridge. Had the same architect.
Huh.
When we arrived at Kamloops, we were transferred to the hotel for overnight stay, and our luggage was already waiting for us in our room. It was actually transported by ground, not by train. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video for day 2 on Rocky Mountaineer. Cheers!